Welcome to the AI Take, powered by 1KE. I'm Sidney from Sydney, and as always, I'm joined by CEO of 1KE, Michael Chanter. Michael, welcome.
Thanks, Sid.
So in every episode, we take 10 minutes to break down one practical AI idea. We pull it apart and ask the only question that really matters. What does this change for you? So let's start with the main idea. Today's AI take is 70% isn't good enough, but 90% usually is. What's your idea here, Michael?
Well, firstly, Sid, thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. This is something I've been thinking about quite a lot. So conceptually, the idea is if you measure output as being the equivalent of a high quality person on a reasonably complex task, that's our sort of measure of quality, then my sort of idea here is that to get to 70% of the same quality is probably about an hour's work, and to get to 90% is probably 100 times that. And in fact, it's a sort of a non-linear thing, because getting to 95 is more like 1,000 hours of work. So I guess the key thing is when people get to 70%, they feel like they're almost there, but they're really not. And that's sort of what I want to talk about this week.
Okay, and so why is this sort of featured as a priority to talk about this week? What's happened in the last 6 months that is sort of making this a topic of priority for us?
Yeah, I think the key thing is that AI has gone from being a tool to really the fundamental engine behind agentic flows. So a lot of people are trying to look at agentic AI as being how they're going to achieve things that humans would have normally done. So it's no longer about just editing a document or something. It's more, how does AI sit inside your workflows? So that's what's made this more of a relevant challenge, because agents are being asked to, in this case, to act and make decisions and work on real workflows. So that's really why it's become much more relevant.
Okay. And so why do you think businesses, the vendors, the channel leaders, why are they getting this wrong at the moment?
Yeah. I think probably the mistake a lot of people making are thinking that it's all about the model. So in other words, a better model is going to close the gap. So going from 70 to 90 is just going to be a matter of engaging a better model. But our experience, and we've been deeply engaged in actually working in agentic workflows, is that that's not really the case. To get from 70 to 90 is less about the model and more about all your workflows, your orchestrations, the way that you orchestrate your agents, a lot of deterministic gates for quality and so on. So it still requires a lot of effort. It's not just a matter of picking a new model or a slightly higher grade model to get the same outcome. So it's more of a reliability is now more of a system problem, right? And people, I think, still underestimate the time and costs required to really productionize their AI workflows.
Okay. So let's say we accept this idea. What should people do differently?
So I think practically what I think people need to be thinking about is less can AI do this, but what quality level does this specific task require? Because if you accept the premise that taking it from 70 to 90 is 100 times the effort, and taking it from 90 to 95 is 1,000 times the effort, there's an economic crossover point. And you really need to think about that carefully, because if you build towards 90%, then you're getting some reliability and a lot of leverage, and you can still keep humans involved when judgment is really valuable. But if you try and chase 95 or 99%, it really needs to be around a outcome where that is absolutely necessary without human intervention. So that's, I think, the practical way. So really what I'm suggesting is that when you're building agentic systems, you should be optimizing for leverage rather than complete automation.
Let's say I ignore this idea. What's the consequences?
Well, look, I can show you some scars, Sid, but on this one, because I've probably lived this.
You may or may not have mentioned the terms polishing pixels.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what you'll end up with is you'll overbuild things. You'll waste a lot of time, months, chasing perfection rather than perhaps getting to good enough. And probably the most important sort of consequence is, if you look across a business today, there's probably hundreds of things where there's an opportunity to get a lot of leverage out of automation. You're probably better off identifying 100 things that you can spend between 1 hour and 100 hours on, rather than trying to really get that one workflow working to 95% or approaching infinity amount of work to get it to 100%. So I think that's the consequence of this, is just to, like all CEOs, I think about it in terms of deployment of capital, right? Mm-hmm. If you invest 1,000 hours in something, you need to really be certain that you're getting a return on that. Perhaps spending 100 hours on 10 things is a far more leveraged outcome.
That's interesting, right? So traditional wisdom says, focus in the one area, whereas we're learning, no, we can actually not go too wide, but have a handful of bets and, go in at 90% rather than trying to do 100% on those things.
Yeah.
So this is sage advice for the broad business community, but we're particularly interested in the technology channel. What threats or opportunities exist for them when you think about this concept of 70 and 90%?
Yeah, I think actually it provides both an opportunity and a threat. The opportunity is that going from 70% to 90% is not, there's a lot of work in that. There's a lot of workflow, architecture, governance, integration work to get to that 90%. For those businesses in the channel that are offering services to customers around building agentic workflows, that's a big opportunity, and there'll be a lot of work in doing that. And in fact, I think it's quite an interesting services opportunity. Where I think the threat is you need to be super careful about what promises you make about getting to 95 or 100% and how you measure success. Because if you make a promise to deliver a 95% outcome, you may be in for 1,000 to infinite number of hours to achieve that if you're not careful. So I think that's an interesting balance that you're going to have to meet in the channel.
Got it. Okay, very cool. This is definitely thought provocation, which we love. So if people only remember one thing from today's take, what should that be?
Sure. So I think the thing is that 70% is maybe not good enough. 90% may well be good enough, but 100% should not automatically be the goal in terms of quality when you're building agentic systems. So that's the first key thing here. But the main point is the goal is the point of maximum economic leverage. In other words, where's the crossover point where investing additional time and effort really isn't going to return a better outcome or a worthwhile outcome, right? So I think people need to understand that better models might move the starting point, but you're always going to have a lot of work to go from that 70% point, and you just need to be very careful around making sure that you define when the work is economically done, because that's the key.
Excellent. So there you have it, folks. This week's AI Take. If you found it useful, please follow and subscribe the AI Take and share it with someone who's trying to make sense of what AI actually changes in business. And of course, we'll be back again with our next lesson with a practical idea and something that you can act on this week. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.